Imagine an entire region where the internet can be switched off for weeks, where roads can be sealed, political activists can be arrested, and journalists can face criminal charges merely for reporting what is happening. Now, imagine that this is taking place in a territory whose name begins with the word Azad, meaning free. This is the crisis unfolding in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. For nearly 2 months, parts of the region, particularly Rawalakot, Sudnoti, and the wider Poonch division, have witnessed protests, sit ins, mass arrests, deadly clashes, and a prolonged communications blackout. But if you depend upon Pakistan's major television networks, you will have seen only fragments of this story, if you have seen it at all. Today, I want to explain who the Jammu Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee are, what they are demanding, why they have been banned under anti-terrorism legislation, and why reporters on the ground now say the real number of people killed is far higher than the figures reaching the national media. The Joint Awami Action Committee, commonly referred to by the letters JAAC, is not a conventional political party. It emerged in 2023 as a grassroots coalition of traders, transporters, lawyers, students, workers, and civil society representatives. Its original demands were neither secret nor terrorist. People demanded affordable flour, lower electricity prices, an end to prolonged power cuts, and greater authority over resources generated within Azad Kashmir. They also demanded an end to the excessive vehicles, allowances, pensions, and privileges enjoyed by politicians and senior officials, while ordinary families struggled with inflation and unemployment. The movement attracted widespread support because these were genuine public grievances. In May 2024, thousands of people joined a long march towards Muzaffarabad. The authorities attempted to contain the movement through arrests, roadblocks, tear gas, and the deployment of security forces. Clashes followed. 3 protesters and 1 police officer were killed. Eventually, the federal government intervened, provided subsidies, and reduced electricity and flour prices. The movement suspended its protest, but many of the underlying governance reforms remained unfulfilled. In September and October 2025, the Action Committee returned with a broader 38-point charter. Its demands covered healthcare, education, infrastructure, local government, public accountability, and political representation. That mobilization also ended in tragedy. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, at least 9 people, including 6 civilians and 3 police officers, were killed. More than 200 people were injured. A communications blackout was imposed, and negotiations began only after lives had been lost. An agreement was signed on the 4th of October 2025. The government accepted most of the demands and promised improvements to the electricity system, healthcare, education, and local government. But one major disagreement remained unresolved. 12 seats in the Azad Kashmir Legislative Assembly are reserved for refugees from Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir, who now live elsewhere in Pakistan. The Action Committee argues that people who do not currently reside in Azad Kashmir should not exercise such significant influence over its government, budget, and political future. It claims that these constituencies allow political parties governing in Islamabad to influence the formation of governments in Muzaffarabad. The government rejects this demand. It argues that these seats are constitutionally protected and preserve the representation of Kashmiris displaced after 1947. In June 2026, the Azad Kashmir Supreme Court ruled that these seats could only be removed through a constitutional amendment passed by the Legislative Assembly. That legal point must be acknowledged. A constitutional disagreement should ultimately be resolved through a constitutional process. Protesters do not have the right to attack people, assault police officers, or destroy property. Police officers have also been killed and injured, and those lives matter. Any protester individually responsible for violence must face an independent investigation and due process. But individual acts of violence cannot automatically transform an entire grassroots movement and every person supporting it into terrorists. On the 5th of June, 2026, just days before a planned region-wide strike, the government proscribed the Joint Awami Action Committee under the Azad Kashmir Anti-Terrorism Act. On the same day, internet and mobile data services were suspended. Visitors were advised to leave the region, roads were blocked. Federal paramilitary personnel were deployed. The committee's central office was sealed and arrests began across the territory. Amnesty International described the response as a violent and sweeping crackdown involving mass arbitrary arrests, an internet shutdown, and deadly force. Amnesty International called the terrorism designation disproportionate and unlawful. By the 19th of June, Reuters had reported at least 24 deaths. Those deaths included 20 civilians and 4 police officers. The regional police chief said that 515 people had been detained and 97 police officers had been injured. By the 22nd of July, Al Jazeera reported that even conservative estimates placed the number of dead at nearly 30. But reporters and community sources inside Azad Kashmir now present an even more disturbing figure. A 2-page document has emerged carrying the title List of Kashmiri Martyrs from the 5th of June to the 28th of July. It contains 67 numbered entries. These are not merely anonymous numbers. The document records names, parentage, dates for many of the reported deaths, and home areas across Azad Kashmir. The list has reportedly been compiled and circulated by reporters and community sources working on the ground. At the bottom of its second page, it states clearly that the total number of martyrs is 67. This figure has not been accepted or publicly accounted for by the state, nor has it been independently audited by a national commission. And that is precisely the problem. When the internet is disabled, media access is restricted, and local journalists risk arrest, independent verification becomes extraordinarily difficult. We must therefore be precise. This document does not establish the individual circumstances or cause of every death. It would be irresponsible to claim, without further evidence, that every person named on the list was killed by the same security force or under the same circumstances. But it would be even more irresponsible to pretend that these 67 names do not exist. These families deserve answers. Hospitals, police stations, and district administrations possess records. Post-mortem reports exist where examinations were conducted. Burial records, photographs, witnesses, and family testimony can be collected. If the locally documented figure of 67 is wrong, the state should open its records and demonstrate why. If it is correct, or even substantially correct, Pakistan is confronting one of the deadliest episodes of internal repression in Azad Kashmir's recent history. That is why an independent judicial commission is essential. It must establish the identity of every person killed. It must establish the date and location of each death. It must determine the cause of death. It must investigate whether live ammunition was used, which units were deployed, and whether the force used was lawful and proportionate. The truth cannot be determined through government press conferences or social media posts alone. Instead of addressing these questions transparently, government officials have repeatedly accused the movement of being foreign-sponsored and funded by India. On the 6th of July, the Azad Kashmir Information Secretary claimed that state institutions possessed evidence of Indian funding behind the committee's agenda. On the 27th of July, Pakistan's information minister announced the arrest of a digital marketing professional who had allegedly been paid by Indian contacts to circulate anti-state material. The minister claimed that much of the content concerned the Awami Action Committee. These are serious allegations. But an accusation is not proof. Material displayed during a press conference is not a substitute for evidence examined before an independent court. Even if one social media operator received money from an Indian contact, that would not establish that the entire Awami Action Committee or the thousands of Kashmiris supporting its demands is controlled or financed by India. If credible evidence exists against named individuals, present it in court. Allow independent lawyers and journalists to examine it. Prosecute the individuals responsible through due process. Do not use an untested allegation to criminalize an entire population. India undoubtedly has a propaganda interest in exploiting unrest inside Pakistan administered Kashmir. Indian media will use these events to embarrass Pakistan. But India's exploitation of a crisis does not prove that India created the crisis. Foreign propaganda did not invent expensive electricity. It did not invent flour shortages, unemployment, elite privileges, unfulfilled agreements, or public anger over political representation. Those grievances existed before the latest foreign funding accusations. It would not be completely accurate to say that no Pakistani outlet has reported these events. Dawn and some other publications have carried valuable reports. But the absence of sustained and proportionate coverage on Pakistan's major television networks is impossible to ignore. This is not merely normal editorial neglect. Reuters reported that the authorities restricted media access to parts of Azad Kashmir. Internet services were suspended across the region from the 5th of June. After 48 days, services were only partially restored in Mirpur, Kotli, and Bimba, while other areas remained disconnected. Most disturbing is the case of Kashmiri journalist and YouTuber Sohrab Barkat. He was arrested after reporting on the political situation. He was accused of promoting the Action Committee's views through his YouTube channel. The Committee to Protect Journalists described his detention as an attempt to criminalize independent reporting. Think about the message this sends. If reporting a banned organization's position can itself be interpreted as promoting that organization, every journalist and television producer understands the risk. A government does not always need to issue a written instruction saying, do not report this story, arrest one reporter, block access to the region, switch off the internet, apply anti terrorism and cybercrime laws, then allow fear to do the rest. That is how a de facto media blackout is created. It is why local reporters, social media users, and independent YouTubers have become so important. But we must also report responsibly. Every name, image, and casualty claim should be verified wherever possible. Old footage and exaggerated claims will only help those attempting to discredit genuine evidence. Voting began in Mirpur division on the 27th of July. Polling in Muzaffarabad and the refugee constituencies is scheduled for the 2nd of August. Voting in protest hit Poonch has been postponed until the 10th of August because of security concerns. But an election cannot resolve this crisis. While a major grassroots movement remains banned, its leaders remain detained, associated candidates are excluded, and citizens remain unable to communicate freely. The solution must begin with 5 immediate steps. First, restore internet and mobile services completely. Second, release journalists and all peaceful protesters detained merely for their reporting, speech, or association. Third, publish a complete and independently verifiable casualty list and investigate all 67 locally documented deaths. Fourth, present any credible evidence of Indian financing before an independent court. And fifth, establish a judicial commission to investigate every civilian and police death, every allegation of unlawful force, and every reported act of violence. Pakistan cannot condemn killings, internet shutdowns, and terrorism charges against peaceful dissent in Indian administered Kashmir while using comparable methods against Kashmiris under its own administration. The credibility of Pakistan's position on Kashmir depends not only on what Pakistan says about India, it depends on how Pakistan treats Kashmiris where it exercises authority. These 67 names must not be allowed to disappear into a communications blackout. They were human beings, they had families, they had homes, and every one of them deserves the truth. Silencing Kashmiris will not eliminate their grievances. Calling them traitors will not answer their questions. Shutting down the internet will not erase the evidence. And preventing television channels from showing the dead will not bring those people back to life. The truth may be delayed, it may be censored, it may be forced off television, but it cannot remain buried forever.